Welcome, everyone, to today's Local Lens. We're excited to have us with you tonight. Before we jump in, I'd like to review a few group agreements, something that we do at, at the beginning of every session. The purpose of today's session is to be a space for learning and conversation among members of community councils and the public. The goal of the session is to dive deep into various governmental structures within the municipality. And today we're all agreeing to treat each other with respect, recognize our neighborhood's unique qualities, and allow everyone a chance to participate. As a reminder, some logistical notes. Please remember to stay muted unless you're called on. After the presentation, there will be a chance for questions. You can either raise your hand or you can drop your question in the chat. Please keep your questions on topic, though this is a rather broad topic for today, and do be considerate of the time. At the end of the session, we'll provide contact information and encourage you to invite the presenters to your community council to provide more updates. Today's topic is with the lovely Chair Constant, who will be stepping away from the role shortly, and I'm really excited to have him on today to talk about the Assembly progress and the work he's done, and maybe, speak a little bit about his own time with community councils. Thank you, Chris, for joining us today.
Hello, everybody, and good evening. And we have a bit of a slideshow we'll walk through, but I'm infamous, if not notorious, for just using it as a guide and kind of going where the conversation may lead. And since it's a small group, I think questions along the way are fine, as opposed to waiting the whole way. If it were larger, more people, I would say we would have to structure it differently. But so raise your hand if you have a question. And hello. So I know we have a slide deck. Maybe we'll pop that up. Thank you, Anchorage. That's where we start. The Federation of Community Councils, community.org/assembly. And I'm Christopher Constant, your outgoing assembly chair. Next slide, please. So here's a little bit about the assembly. The assembly is a 12-member body, as you all well know. In 2021, we added a 12th member. Before that, we were 11 members back to 1975. The addition of the 12th member did something really great for North Anchorage, the district that I represent, that it provided a second member so that now this moment that's coming upon us, where I'm no longer going to be in office and we have a new member coming to represent the North Anchorage district, for the first time, really, and as long as anyone can remember, the district is going to have an assembly member with 4 years of experience to look out for the new member and to make sure my neighbors, our neighbors, have someone to call who knows who to call to get help, fill in the pothole, or fixing the power line that's fallen down, or getting the park fixed, or clearing the tree out of the roadway that fell down. And so I'm pretty excited that essentially this week, actually next week, will be the first time the full promise of Proposition 12 that added the 12th member will be fulfilled. We have members from Eklutna to Portage, basically represented in the assembly. We have 2 members for each district, and of course, we are just finalizing our 2026 regular election season. And in most years, it would already be decided and done on all questions, but there is one open question remaining. All of the races, all of the questions have been asked and answered, but one is close enough within the margin that it'll be facing a recount on Friday after Thursday's public session of canvass. Next slide. So I'm speaking to a crowd of folks who know a lot about what the assembly does. And so I'm going to speak briefly about what I see as what we've done very well, what our accomplishments are. So this year we had a lot of fun celebrating the municipality's 50th anniversary. So that is, but those are a couple of my friends that are original charter conveners, Lisa Parker and Jane Angvik. We threw a party like you wouldn't believe. We had all the municipal departments down at the museum. We had a little reception up in the top where we had a little bit of speechifying before we did a celebration down in the library. But what we were really doing is marking the fact that our municipality, in the lifespan of a city, has reached its majority, I think, 50 years. It's quite a span, and you think of it in the context of a person, but in the context of a city, it's kind of the blink of an eye. In fact, I have a theory that our municipality is in some ways very much like a teenager, a teenager who hasn't quite figured out how to live on his own. Mom and dad have been taking care of us for a long time. You could think of that as state and federal money. And we're kind of moving out on our own because mom and dad have said, we're not supporting you anymore. And we're figuring it out. And it's a little bit messy out in our kind of yard and in our rooms. But the fact is, we're giving it our go. And so I definitely like to help people think about our city as a very young city, even though we've hit 50 years old as a municipality and 100 years old as an incorporated area. The Assembly has adopted a number of critical priorities. If Mr. Rivera were here with us, and he was going to try to be, but he couldn't make it today, he really set the Assembly on a path to establishing a published work plan, list our priorities, and approve them by the body, and then work on them in a way that the public can see. And so when people wonder what's the Assembly up to and why is it doing what it's doing, for at least the last 4 years, I think, the Assembly has established an adopted set of priorities. And so currently, as a lot of folks know, the Assembly is working hard on addressing housing concerns. The fact that we have homelessness in the street, the fact that we have young people unable to figure out a place to live, that getting into the housing market is hard, the fact that we have a lot of seniors who aren't quite sure how they're going to sell their homes because their homes are 5 and 6 bedrooms and they're large and people aren't really buying them. The fact is, we're in a housing crisis. So the Assembly has established housing action as a priority, and we clearly communicate our vision. We are working to streamline codes and processes, spur innovation, and create attainable housing. Also, an Assembly priority is energy infrastructure and transportation. There is an energy crisis in the state of Alaska right now. We are staring down a substantial lack of natural gas, which is how we fuel the heat in our homes all winter long. And that has created quite an interesting conversation in the region. It would be quite surprising to see the state of Alaska start to import natural gas from the natural gas markets when we have vast storehouses of energy wealth on the North Slope. And so we're trying to figure out how to make it from where we are now, which is on the precipice of risk, to a place where we have energy security. Also, infrastructure is super critical. I'm proud to speak about the work that we've done at the Port of Alaska and its modernization. When I came into office in 2017, it was an absolute nightmare. The $400+ million investment that started in about the year 2003 essentially failed. And the funds that were used were taken from us. They were funded and used through the federal government, MARAD, and the project that they built on our behalf failed. And they walked away and said, we're not at risk. We don't care. We didn't promise that we were going to deliver you a port that worked with the $400 million that we received. And so we've been struggling through the quagmire of bad design, bad construction, rebooting the design, figuring out how we're going to pay for it, and then beginning the process and getting us to where we are now, where last summer and the summer before, we spent our time literally tearing out the earth that was put in during the first port effort. And now this summer, get ready. You're going to hear it all summer long, and probably for the next 6 years, you're going to hear pile drive because we're going to construction in Terminal 1 down at the port, which is very exciting because the reality of Alaska's economy is that that port provides goods to 80+% of Alaska's population. Think about that. That's everywhere on the road belt and everywhere a barge goes. The goods generally come through the Port of Alaska. That port is the most essential piece of infrastructure to the state of Alaska and its people. And then, of course, we're working on transportation policy, road safety. You know, it's no secret our roads are dangerous. It's no secret that our roads, we share management authority with the state of Alaska. And it's also no secret that the majority of the terrible deaths that have been occurring on our roads happen on our high-speed network of state roads that run through our residential neighborhoods in our community. And the ADA compliance of our facilities is an absolute disaster. The reality is, if you're walking up Gamble Street, or worse, wheelchairing up Gamble Street, especially in the winter, the 6-foot sidewalk is used as snow storage, and it has 2 power poles cutting the sidewalk. So you actually see people in wheelchairs pushing their way up a federal highway in the lane of traffic while cars are moving by because there is no sidewalk for them to be on. So the assembly has been hard at work trying to figure out how to work better with the state of Alaska and to identify methods to improve the public safety of our roadways. And so that's been a very high priority. Another very important priority area that the assembly has been working on has been public health, public safety, and quality of life. The reality of Anchorage over the last 15 years has been we've been living in an economy that has had no engine. The state has essentially been in a recession for 11 years. Compound that with the Great Recession that occurred in 2008, that was an international crisis. And the fact is, there's been no substantial economic engine in the municipality for the better part of 20 years. That translates into increased crime, increased suffering, increased homelessness, increased insecurity for everybody, and a reduction in quality of life. Now, we'll get a bit into the finances as we go a little bit further into the presentation. But the reality also at the same time of this kind of lack of an economic engine, which when BP left, we really suffered. Our city started to feel the drain and be able to see the drain. And you can see it in our sidewalks. You can see it in the poverty that is popping up all over. The assembly has made a concerted effort to fund public safety, mental health services, implement the crisis now model, work with our partners to build and secure housing, and also to set up really important complex behavioral health responses like the program that's opening at South Central Foundation's Ernie Turner Center campus. If you haven't noticed, when you drive by on Tudor at Elmore, there's a 4-story mega building that's going in right now, which promises to be a critical link in solving the behavioral health crisis that for most of us looks like homeless people in camps and sometimes getting kind of accosted by people who are less than able to take care of themselves in the community. But to the community of providers, and especially to the people on the streets, what it looks like is there's no place to go. And so what you're starting to see right now is a concerted effort of a place to go for people to get out of the street life and find a way back into social society. We've also been investing in outdoor and public spaces really substantially. Some people are a little bit mad. We added a small surcharge per ton at the landfill, which for the first time creates a dedicated team to go out and pick up trash in our public spaces. For the longest time, the Parks and Rec Department has been tasked with picking up trash on roadways. That's not their mission, and it's not how they're funded. Well, now we have a dedicated team that's out there that's double the capacity we've ever had. And in fact, if you need help and you find a place that needs to be cleaned up, you need to just call 907-343-GARB and let them know where the mess is, and they will show up generally within 24 to 36 hours, and that spot will be addressed. And that's kind of part of a bigger effort to prioritize neighborhood safety, because really that's one of the core functions of government. Now, the last area that the assembly has set as a priority, it kind of parallels the mayor in her priorities. The mayor's priorities have been housing, public safety, and good government. The assembly generally agrees. And the way we're doing that is monitoring service delivery to ensure high quality municipal operations, that when the public calls, the government is there to respond. And we've been working hard to support the municipal workforce, which often looks like paying them a fair wage, making sure that the workplace is satisfactory, that employees want to stay, and rebuilding the workforce so that we can get to the point where we have people to deliver the services of government. There was a point in the last 5 years where we were suffering 30 and 40% vacancy in our municipal employment because people decided it was not a good place to work. With this administration and assembly working together, we're now reporting 90+% occupancy in the jobs that we have out there. Some departments 100% full, that we're down to 60%. And so there is great results that we've been able to deliver. Separately, we also have been working to secure our fiscal future, which is really tricky because, as you'll see later in the proposal, in the presentation, the reality is our partners have left us and we are the only ones here that are going to save us. But beyond that, in the previous administration, they delivered one audit. They were here for 3 years. They delivered one audit. The audit that they delivered was the one that was handed to them just before, just as they entered office by the administration that had just left. And so the municipality has failed to have an audit for really the last 3 years. We've caught up. We've got 2023 delivered at the end of this month. In the next 10 days, we'll have 2024 delivered, which means we're on track to deliver 2025 in a timely manner, which provides for the public the facts that they need to understand that we are spending their dollars efficiently, that our municipality is working really hard to deliver on our fiscal future. So now our legislative services team has done a great job creating a new tool for you. It's called the Civic Anchor, which is your local government. You can check it out at muni.org/assembly. And they had their first really great event last week at the assembly meeting. If you came down, had an opportunity to see it, it was fantastic. We had department heads, in particular, we had the planning staff and a number of other folks out there meeting directly with the public to understand how things work. And that's one of the high priorities of the assembly. And I think you'll see more of it coming in the near term because the previous assembly, the one that I'm departing with, we were tasked with crisis response and managing through the most existential period in the history of Anchorage. This new assembly is coming in the beneficiary of the work that we had done. And so kind of in Maslow's hierarchy of municipal governance, they are coming in and they're starting to look at how can we reconstitute and do a better job of reaching out to the public, inviting the public in to the work that we are doing and making it so that the most possible engagement happens with our neighbors on the matters that are important to their lives and that we are deciding on. So Civic Anchor is a really important piece. And I think the community council system is a big player in understanding how this works and getting the word out. So some of the work that we've done that people have been so focused on over the last many years is how are we addressing issues relating to homelessness? And it has been, I think, quite a scandal of deteriorated economics and kind of social networks. We have been working so hard to turn the tide, and we have started to see results. So this is the first year that we have had and commit to and funded year-round shelter capacity with our shelter at 56th Avenue and Linda's Place. So 56th Avenue and 5th Avenue. We've actually just opened up, I think it's 30 recovery housing units called Willow Commons on the old Tudor and Elmore site there. We've also expanded the fire department and the police department's mobile behavioral health units. I think generally they're calling them the HOPE team, but you have the mobile intervention team, which is the police's response where they send a clinician out with the APD teams. Then you have the fire department's non-police response, which is the mobile crisis team. And what that's doing is meeting the people who are in crisis with a professional who's skilled at addressing behavioral health concerns right there in the field with the goal to reduce the need for police interactions or interactions using lethal or less than lethal means to protect the public safety. And it's really working. And we've actually moved the fire department's mobile crisis team to a 24/7 unit. And for the fiscal hawks out there, what we're intending to do with that, and I think we're getting really close, is create it as a Medicaid billable service, which will provide substantial revenues to underwrite the expenses of our second largest and most expensive department. And as I mentioned before, there's a major community-wide behavioral health investment by South Central Foundation. Providence is close on their heels with a second program. And ultimately, we've strengthened our coordinated approach through the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. Now, Some of you probably read the letter to the editor that I wrote that celebrated the fact that for the first time in as long as I can remember, 20 years, we had no major encampments. And that was a celebration worth having, the fact that for a moment we had no camps. Now, I was very clear when I wrote that letter not to be celebrating mission accomplished because these issues are complex. It was a long winter. People were sheltered and it wasn't warm out. Like clockwork, on March 21st, the spring equinox, I literally started watching people start seeking out places to go and find a camp outdoors. And so the work that we've done in the past is building up, and what we now have done are some substantial changes to the criminal code that provide the police department and the mayor's administration an opportunity for swift responses when camps start to grow so we can ensure we never see ourselves again with a massive tent city that is unsafe, that is bad for vulnerable people, and it really drags down the health and safety of our city. So we've been working really, really hard, and I'm very proud of some of the accomplishments that we've been able to deliver, and we have a lot of work left to do. Now, housing policy. This is a kind of a primary issue that folks in community councils really like to talk about, or maybe would prefer not to talk about so much, because the assembly has been focused on it very, very intently. And that focus is not going to shift anytime in the kind of coming years. Housing is the baseline. We've been working to streamline how housing is built in our town. We've made it somewhat less onerous to unlock potential housing by providing more streamlined rezoning processes. We've worked to support redevelopment with incentives of vacant and abandoned, incentivized redevelopment of vacant and abandoned properties. We've also created tax incentives for multifamily housing, which is one of the key elements that's going to get us out of this to in key areas to increase the density where we can start to see people have places that are affordable to live. I was thinking of housing a condo, little condos right off of Tudor, kind of by Tudor and Elmore. Actually, when I first moved to Alaska, they sold at $30,000 about 30 years ago for a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. Now it's $130,000 just to get into one of those, and there are just not that many of them. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. Essentially, we've also established, this is kind of exciting, it's been getting some news this week, some pre-approved designs for ADUs to add smaller subordinate use housing units on properties across the municipality. And that's available at muni.org/ADU. Now, again, some concerns folks have about housing, the policy changes too quickly. We don't want to do that in this area. We want to protect this. We want to do that. These are the conversations that are going to be happening for the next 10 to 15 years in this town as we figure out how we're going to grow housing opportunities for people across the municipality. The other piece that it just starts this next week is a short-term rental registration, which opens May 1st and will be in full force, I think, in 90 days or 6 months. There's a grace period for short-term rental operators to register. Now, the conversation about short-term rentals has been very interesting. There have been discussions about taxation. There have been discussions about banning them in this town. There have been licensure discussions, but what did pass was a registry. And I think that that's a pretty important policy change because with all the discussions about problems in the neighborhoods, what we can't really do is point to how many and where short-term rentals are operating. We know that there are a couple of neighborhoods in the municipality, in particular Girdwood and South Addition, where there have been a huge number of residential properties that have been consumed into commercial uses such as short-term rentals. And so the assembly has been acting in a measured way to secure a way to understand the impacts of these. Now, I had a constituent once tell me that her worst fear is that her neighbor's property would burn down and then a developer would buy it and build a tall building right next to her house, 5 feet away from her property line. And I rebutted, like, my biggest fear would be that a hotel would open up in the house next to my house, and I would have a chronic and cyclical flow of people that I could never know who they are, kind of trashing the property next to me. And so somewhere out there, this information is going to provide a great service to the municipality as we move forward to understand where in our town residential properties are being converted to commercial properties right next to our homes. And that starts May 1st. Now, this is kind of one of the very important pieces of the presentation. And I think we're getting close to the end, a little bit more to go in terms of talking at you, and then we'll do some questions and answers, have a conversation. One of the major priorities of the Assembly is to secure our fiscal future. Boy, it is tricky right now. Now, this graphic is the process, our annual process by which we secure the funding to operate the municipality and all of its services, whether that's bus services, whether that's school funding that comes from the local government, or police and fire response, public health, etc. And it all starts with your property appraisal, which kicks off in January and runs through about a month. And then once that process, and that was kind of a very public, interesting process this year that is still underway with kind of more appeals than we've ever seen in a long time. After the appraisals are done, the tax assessor applies all of the exemptions. And then what happens next week is we receive and approve the final annual budget with calculated mill rates, and we levy the taxes. And then it moves to collecting the taxes in May and in August, or June and in August. And there is how we secure the financial future with the means that we have under the tax cap. Now, no one likes to pay their tax bills. And everyone feels like their taxes have gone up and they're not getting their money's worth. Not everyone, but that's a common refrain. And I want to use this chart here to help people to see our taxation levels based on nominal taxes, meaning the real dollars today, not the real dollars, the dollars today, what they're worth today, what they were worth then. So in 2006, your average annual property tax bill was around $3,800, and you see in the blue it steadily increases nearly every year up to 2025. But if you look at the inflation adjusted number in orange, you'll see that we have been remarkably consistent about our taxation level over many years. And that's because we're bound by a tax cap. Now, where does the money go? That's always an important question for folks. The top 5 departments in the municipality by budget, they spend 70% of the budget. The pie chart on the right kind of shows you really well what that looks like. The police department at the top, 145.9 million. The fire department is next, 123.3 million. Maintenance and operations, that's roads, snow plowing and potholes, 117.8 million. Then you have transit, the bus service, at 32.9, and then Parks and Rec at 28.7. And then everything else, all the rest of the municipality, that's 23 departments, all would fit within 30% of the total budget. So it's a pretty tight budget with some very large expense categories. Now, mind you, that does not include the school district levy, and that's kind of a separate focus. The school district, and we'll talk a bit about that, but this is your general taxation at this time. Now, we have a tax cap, and we chose to include this graphic here for you so you can see a little bit of a snapshot. In 1983, our local property taxes were $50 million. And after the tax cap limit, it went up to $60 million. It constrains our property tax growth, and it makes our budget pretty predictable, or the intent was. And it was intended to actually slow growth within our city, which is very interesting theory. I think really it meant to slow growth of the government. I don't know that many really wanted to slow growth within the city, but some did. And what that's done has managed to keep our taxes steady over time. Remember, the orange shows that it's pretty flat, even though it feels like it's gone up. And our budget really is flat. Now, the tax cap is very interesting. If you look at that $60 million that I talked about, that's the blue on the 1984 line there. Now, the orange is other local revenues. These are fees and other things that are from local sources. Then you have the gray, which is the state contribution. And then you have the yellow, which is federal contribution. So now that was in the dollars of the day. If you adjust those dollars for inflation, the 1984 dollars, you would have your tax levy close to 200 million, then your other local revenue, another kind of 180 million, and then you would have about 180 million dollars of state investment at the time, and then approximately 20 million dollars of federal investment. Now, if you look at the bar on the right, something kind of homogenizing happens. We go from 4 to 3 and really just 2, because the top one is very limited. It's maybe 5 million or so. So what you see there is that our property taxes have in fact increased to cover for the expenditures that the state is no longer paying. And our local contributions of other revenue have also kept pace. And so it's important for folks to understand that, yes, our taxes have been steady from a real dollar perspective when you correct for inflation, but your and my and every other taxpayer's portion has gone up because one of our key partners has left the building. We're doing without the state that which we need to do. And our population has increased. So in Anchorage in 1983-84, we had 211,000 people, $181 million budget. In real today dollars, $590 million, which is $2,796 per capita, with a property tax bill, I think, per 100,000 of $285. Now, today, we have about a 30% increase in population, 38% increase in population to 291,000. We have $666 million, which is an 11% increase over the 1983 amount. So population increase and demands on our resources, 38% up, revenues up 11% without state investments. And so that's $2,297 or $500 less per person in the municipality. But our tax levies are 4.7 times more because we're paying the bills. That's hard. That is hard medicine, and that's the medicine we've been forced to take. And we've heard from a number of people that our government just needs to be more efficient. That's how we're going to balance the books and kind of reduce the pressure on the taxpayer. But I can tell you, every single year we've passed a budget, we have had to figure out how to be more efficient. And from where I sit, there's not a lot more efficiency to be found. But maybe that's the beauty of term limits. There can be other people who challenge the question of what our efficiencies can look like. So, lasting legacies. I think this is a part where I wax a little poetic. The port. We are rebuilding the port. It's going to bug the heck out of a lot of people that live anywhere near the north of town as they hear pounding piles for the next 5 years. But we're going to totally transform the Port of Alaska and secure it for the next 75 years. Probably my favorite project that I worked on, or at least maybe this top two, was adding the 12th member. It's also building a bridge with our friends, the native village of Eklutna, our neighbors. Within our municipality, we have a sovereign government recognized by the federal government through the Constitution and treaties over time, the native village of Eklutna. They are a sovereign entity. And I worked hard to generate, and we succeeded in partnering with them to recognize their sovereignty in our code and treat with them from a government to government perspective. And what this means is that we will hopefully see harmony between the municipality and the tribe forever for the next 100 years and more, next 1,000 years. And at the same time, we recognized all of the 229 of the 575 federally recognized tribes that live in Alaska. And so we have done something that is unprecedented. There's one other city in the country that did this. It was Albuquerque. They did it at the same time as us. They beat us in the final action, but we started the process early and we had a year of study. And it's very exciting, this work. So I'm really grateful. And I know we have a couple representatives of the tribe here in the chat. And again, the creation of the second member for the North District is really one of the most significant things that has occurred in my service. I'm super grateful to the voters who supported this cause. And now I am super glad to report that once the certification occurs, I'll be replacing myself with a young lady who's got vitality and energy and a fresh perspective, Sydney Scout, who will work with Daniel to secure the North. So I have a number of thoughts, and I'm going to kind of just give them here, and then we can have that chat if anyone wishes. So I am a product of the community council system. I served for 9 years in the Fairview Community Council before securing election and serving 9 years on the Assembly, which means this project has been an 18-year effort for me. That is kind of astounding to think about because I'm still that fresh young college graduate who just got to Alaska somehow in my brain. Community councils are fascinating entities. I think there's 38 of them in Anchorage or so. And they represent people with different opinions and different takes all over town, small groups that have kind of more parochial values that make sense to them and their neighborhoods. We have community councils that have road service areas. We have community councils that have tribal entities, that have nursing programs, that have folks who work in theater and landscaping and all of those amazing things. It's very representative of our town. Now, I got my start in the community council by trying to fix a park in my neighborhood. And in fact, I was looking at some of the folks who were in the chat today, and I noted one of them works with somebody named Elise Huggins. And Elise was a landscape architect who volunteered to create a site plan for me for a proposed dog park in my neighborhood. And my friend who was the senior park planner said, here's how you do it. You got to go visit all the community councils that are 500 feet or closer within the boundary of that park and talk with them and get their support. And if they support you, then we can move it to the Parks and Rec Commission and the park can be converted to an off-leash dog park. And I spent a whole summer of my life knocking on doors and meeting neighbors and talking to the community councils. And I got the support of my community council, Fairview. And I went to and created probably the most contentious season the South Edition Community Council has on record, at which point a meeting that was usually 7 or 8 people turned into 150 people. No, 106 people. That was how many people showed up that night. To vote on the question of whether they should support the conversion of a park into add an element, a fenced off-leash dog park at a neighborhood scale, not the big ones like we had at the University Lake or out by the airport. And that vote divided the community, 50 yeses, 56 noes. And I can honestly say I watched the noes. Some people vote 2 and 3 times. So it wasn't really a fair process, but it was the process. And the park that I wanted to convert was kind of notorious in the neighborhood because 2 times in one summer, a woman, 2 different women died of alcohol poisoning in the park. And I just wanted to do something with that park that wasn't sad and deadly and, notorious. And so, although I lost that vote, I realized that there were bigger issues that needed to be solved. And those issues tuned me into working with the community council, reaching out to my elected representatives, and starting the conversation about fixing our roads, fixing our homeless issues, fixing our parks, and making our neighborhoods safe, which is really where I leave the assembly and its priorities. I'm a little bit, how do I say this respectfully, jaded with my perception of how community councils have operated because the community council's power is in its reputational strength. If it is a fair convener and its processes hear all comers and its voice is heard clearly and they publish the records of their proceedings, then it's easy to hear and accept that the community council's voice is valid. But some community councils have been cavalier about how they make decisions and communicate. And there was one process in which I saw really hard misinformation being shared and communicated across the town in a way that really was disillusioning about how the process works. But Ari and I have had lots of discussions, and my peers on the assembly have had lots of discussions, and I inherently believe in the strength of our community council system actually makes our public process better. As long as everybody is following through with the spirit of the work, which is to engage robustly, and to be honest in our communications with each other. When you pass a resolution, I would offer the humble advice to make sure that every single line of that resolution is based in fact and not just opinion, and especially not in misinformation, because when you put that forward and we read it, if it isn't factually substantiated, then it just becomes noise to the public process. And we don't like that. We like to have information as opposed to noise. And so that's me offering that your power, my perspective, that your power is truly your reputation. Protect that reputation. Protect it passionately when you are a leader in your community council. Don't let half-baked ideas make it through the process. Make sure the cake is fully baked before it leaves your doors. That will provide you with greater access to influence of the public process as it goes along. So that's my talk. I have a lot of thoughts and passion about this work, and I have a lot of respect for a lot of the people who have served in their community councils. I have come through this process, and it made me who I am. Particular Fairview, and if you know Fairview, it's a ragtag group of little warriors, which I think I have embodied. So I'm happy to spend the rest of the time just talking about questions and answers, and thank you for tuning in.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, Chris. And I invite anybody who has a question to either drop it in the chat or raise their hand. It seems like we've got one. Lee Soul.
And when you speak, let me know where you're from.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Liesl Snyder from District 4, Mr. Rivera's district. I think it's probably somebody else now. I was curious about when you were talking about community councils, because I've gone to the community councils here and I'm like, where is everybody? And they are limited in what type of communication they can send to people to get them information. And I was just curious if you knew what that limitation was, because yeah, I'd like to try to get more people to our meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Liesel. And yeah, Midtown will definitely have a new member. Felix is done the same day I am, around 9 p.m. on the 28th. And you have hit on one of the fundamental challenges of the community council system. Way back when Jack Roderick put the proposal forward to the voters, there was a lot of idealism and not a lot of pragmatism about what does it mean to convene neighbors, right? And mostly what we find over time that gets neighbors out is when there's some kind of pain or problem, right? And while that brings a lot of people in, it often brings people in for just a minute until their pain is resolved. And what we look for and hope for, obviously, and I think your question points to, is how to get a more representative sample of our neighbors who are in and participate in a sustained manner. And that has been the fundamental challenge of the process for the last maybe 5 to 10 years. And there are some councils that are painfully not representative of the neighborhoods. And those are in my district. And a lot of the folks who would be more representative are working 3 jobs and keeping shoes and food and heat for their kids while they're trying to get them to school. They can't afford the time to go and sit in a room and talk about abstract matters relating to zoning or other issues. And so it's tricky. And there isn't any barrier on communication per se, except that in the old days, when we were flush with money, each council used to get a little bit of money for postage, and who can afford that anymore? And so the main vehicles of communication are social media pages and email, and the FCC has a great email system. And I will offer that while I'm heading out the door next week, the new members who are coming in particular, Erin Baldwin Day, who's your other assembly person, I think I would say she wouldn't disagree with me. She is hell bent on figuring out an answer to this question. And so I would offer that I can give you my snapshot, but I'm leaving. And Erin is the one to ask that question of, because I think she holds that as a core value of how do we make it more representative? How do we provide better access and make it so more people participate? And so that's a lot of words to say. I don't have a great answer, but let's use the tools we have. And you ask the question that is really the number one challenge, I think, of the community council experiment as it exists today.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll keep watching.
Well, send her an email.
Figure it out.
Send her an email and tell her I was using her name in vain, and see what she says.
All right.
Yeah. Blame me. It's a good question. It's the right question.
If we have any other questions, I can jump in.
I have a
with
question.
One. Oh, go for it, Polly.
My name's Polly Sliz, and I live in District 4, specifically Rogers Park.
Oh, yeah.
And let me tell you, the TSDO has brought up this past year. There have been a lot of meetings. There have been a lot of special community council meetings even. I want to know from you, Mr. Constant, what you see the Assembly's position is on the TSDO at this time.
Well, so obviously the only way the Assembly speaks is by resolution and by ordinance. And so I can't really speak for the Assembly, especially a body I'm leaving next week. And so I've had quite a bit of a meditation this week that is on this topic, and not related to any one specific policy, but on this fear that I see a lot of communities really feeling relating to change that's occurring across the municipality. And it's a catch-22 for the policymakers, because one of the arguments was there's not been enough public process. And then the public process happens and changes are made in response to the public process. Then members of the community argue, we can't keep track. What are you talking about? It's changed so often that we don't even know, right? It's like this bizarre dynamic of a kind of a dysfunctional conversation between communities, the members of the body, and the process. And so it's really, really tricky. And the feeling that I have, just me as a person, I can't speak for the Assembly, is that people's fear is literally strangling the potential of a future for people, young people in particular, to have a place to live in this town. And so that's me, though, right? And I have been at this for a long time and watched the tides come and go. I remember the site condo nightmare when Zamarillo built the little birdhouses where you couldn't get an ambulance in or a fire truck in. So I know the problems and I recognize them. I also understand that people want to protect what they've invested in for the last 30 or 40 years. And so therein lies the challenge of squaring the need to create a community where young people and downsizing senior people have a place to go that isn't just kind of hidebound into what is the past. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. And again, that's just me. I was never a sponsor of the Transportation Supportive Development Ordinance, but I do remember when the 2020 plan, the 2020 land use plan was put into place, everybody agreed. The transportation supportive corridors, the higher density around transportation corridors was a value. It's in plans from 20 plus years ago that I remember the planners telling us about in the community council room. And so it's hard, and I have a theory on leadership separate from the specific question you asked, that the best place to be as a policymaker, the best place to go is where the tension is at, because where the fireworks are at is where the best new policy ideas are going to come. And so my advice to those who are against it or for it is to stay engaged and keep paying attention and bring your passion to the question, because your passion, their passion, all the passions together is going to create the fusion that we need to build the next generation of our community.
Well, just to follow up there, I think that part of the confusion has been it's been difficult to even keep up with what version of the TSDO is presently being used. I know it's version 6 now. But I went to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on October 8th, I believe it was, and spoke and gave my opinion about the TSDO. And that morning, that very morning at 11:15, version 6 had been released. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting happened that evening. And that actually is the evening that the Planning and Zoning Commission voted to forward the TSDO version onto the Assembly. So I know that from my perspective, and none of us even knew that version 6 had been released. I mean, I like there were more people at that meeting that did not know version 6 had been released that very morning. And so I think that there's been so many versions 6 over the course of a year by that time. And the Rogers Park Community Council didn't even know about it until August. And that's because they don't meet during the summertime. And so, yeah, there was a lot of confusion. We had a special community council meeting on August 27th. 104 people showed up to that meeting. And at that time, we passed a resolution to slow the roll because a lot of people had a lot of questions about short-term rentals.
Yeah,
About
and I will say it's 6 months later, and your resolution clearly worked because nothing has moved for the last 6 months or 7 now. April's almost over. And so, yeah, I hear you, and I think staying engaged is really critical. And one note I will offer is assembly members don't really value when a community council says, we don't meet, so you can't act. Right? That is not a thing for the assembly, right? Your board has every right to have special meetings and follow the process. And don't think that the government's going to slow down because councils take the summer off. It's just the city can't work that way. And, we do our best, but the reality is, and that's just me and my little spice on the topic, is that pay attention because we're not stopping. We're charter commands. We meet twice a month and the business must go on. And so, but that's not specific to your concerns relating to the project, but you were heard. Nothing has happened for 7 months. And so, and I don't really know where it is because, like I said, I'm not a sponsor. I was never on that project. It never formally got to me. And, but I can say housing policy is the number one issue we're facing as a community, other than our economic engine that we need to improve.
I'm going to move us on to Rick. You had a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
It wasn't so much a question. I just wanted to, I'm Rick Harrison. I'm the tribal administrator for Native Village of Eklutna. And I wanted to share my appreciation with the comments about working with Eklutna and the partnership that's been developed. It's long overdue, and I really appreciate that work. And I'm also the vice chair of Chickalin Village Traditional Council. And so I wanted to also share my appreciation for the work done around recognizing all the tribes in the state. We all come through Anchorage or live in Anchorage, and it's very much appreciated on that work that's been done and that recognition of our people.
So, Rick, I just want to offer that I really get misty wet eyes when I think about what we've done. It's unprecedented and it's so important and it's world changing. It's just the change is going to take a while to percolate into the world. And Aaron has been a great partner on that work. And it's maybe a little egotistical of myself to say this, but we did this work a full year and a half before the state of Alaska finally moved to recognize the tribes within its boundaries. And so I can say that we pushed Alaska to join us on becoming part of the future instead of being stuck in the past. I'm going to carry that work with me until I'm an old man.
Well, thank you for that.
Thanks, Rick. Do we have any other questions online?
Well, I'm going to end where I started. Thank you all. Our city works because you are part of it, and we get through the hard spots and we build this community together. There is a bright future. We're a little stuck in a place right now, and I have strong hope that it's going to improve, and it's going to improve because we're all going to commit to it.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. I'm assuming those are your final words, unless you want to add anything else.
That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We will have a future local lens, so I encourage you to make sure you're signed up to get emails from us on our website. And everybody have a great night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.